This week marks the beginning of the Conservative leadership race in earnest. Hopefuls have just over 40 days to declare their intention to run. So far, only a few hats are officially in the ring, but others are expected to join. Whoever emerges, the victor could be overseeing a party refresh. A recent survey found many voters view the party as, quote, old and traditional. So is it time for a rebrand? Dennis Matthews is the former director of advertising to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He's now the vice president of marketing and communications at Enterprise. Next to him, Eric Blais is the president of Headspace Marketing, and they both join us from Toronto. Hi there, nice to see you both.
Hi, Rashi.
Hi there.
Dennis, I'm going to start with you. Very simple question. We posed it in the intro there. Does the party need a rebrand?
Yeah, I think more than a rebrand, it's a refresh, and it's to find a way to sort of reinvent itself for the 2020s. And you mentioned, my intro, I worked for Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and that was a great run, but it was a great run sort of in the early part of the 2000s. And as we sort of look forward into the next election, whether it's 2021, 2022, whenever it is, finding a way to sort of reconnect, especially with the suburban and urban voters in the country, I think have increasingly felt just a little bit distant from the Conservative brand in ways that aren't working right now.
Eric, what's your view? Does the party need a rebrand or a refresh, as Dennis puts it?
Well, I would say it needs a rebrand, and the reason I say that is simply that there's so much focus right now on, and rightly so, I guess, on the leadership race and finding the right leader. But if we look at the private sector or not-for-profit sector, you would technically have a clear sense now of the brand, its vision, its purpose, a set of guiding principles. All of this built in such a way that you're going to get not just the right leader, but yet you're going to get the winning of the election down the road. And that's the end game here, is winning an election. So usually when you're selecting a CEO, it's someone who will embody what the brand stands for. And so in this case, I would suggest that it's important to get the brand right, pick the right leader that in fact becomes almost a spokesperson, almost a great communicator in both official languages who will tell the story as it needs to be told, not to the supporters, of course to the supporters, but to those voters who will make the difference come election day.
Dennis, how much does the leader impact, sort of the opposite of what Eric said, or the vice versa, how much does the leader impact the potential brand of the party? I ask because we were just speaking with Rachel Curran, who I'm sure you know very well, and we were talking about the party and it going forward, and she was saying how it's not a bad thing for Stephen Harper to be stepping away from the fund and stepping a bit back from the party, only because his brand of leadership and his qualities informed the brand of the party for so long. So if they are refreshing the image that they have in people's eyes, creating some distance is not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it by Rachel. And you look at Stephen Harper. I mean, he's the most famous Conservative in this country. He's got sort of an outsized impression on the Conservative brand, I think, with voters even to this day. And I sort of hear where Eric is coming from on you want to understand who you are and have your brand, your vision, your purpose sort of established to then get a leader. Unfortunately, the way the process works here, you got to pick a leader first. And I think and I hope that one of the things members will be looking for is who is the leader, who is the one in that group that can actually find a way to sort of reinvent what it means to be a Conservative a little bit. And whereas I think if you're selling a product, you may be looking at it the other way around. And this is one of the ways that politics is unique. You've got to see a leader who can do those things, and it's a tall order at this point.
Eric, you mentioned the significance or the importance of being able to communicate that brand and that messaging in both languages. How difficult is it in this day and age to formulate a brand that translates well across the country?
Well, I think that, again, my expertise is in the commercial sector, but certainly you have national brands, North American brands, global brands that have these platforms that are judged to be relevant and have been proven to be relevant across a broad range of consumers, in this case voters, let's say. Yet the expression needs to be localized to different markets, different segments, and so it's done quite effectively in the commercial sector. So if we're thinking about a brand here, I understand it's a political brand and political parties are unique creatures and all that. But if we're thinking in terms of the Conservative Party brand and having it with a strong foundation that's going to be meaningful to a broad range of voters in Canada, I think it can be communicated smartly in various regions, addressing local issues and so on, but it needs a leader that will reflect that brand in all those markets in a way.
How difficult is it? How difficult a challenge is accomplishing that, Dennis, given the factions that we see, and not just for the Conservatives, for all political parties? What we saw at the end of this election, via the outcome of the election, is a lot of regional differences on display.
Yeah, and for you take a look at the Conservatives specifically, which is obviously what we're talking about here, but there's that third of the country. I mean, the Conservatives probably have the most durable or rock-solid sort of base of support of all of the parties. And yes, it's bigger out in the West for sure, and bigger in rural areas than urban. And I think the big challenge for the Conservative Party, and something I hope doesn't get lost in the leadership race, is looking a bit beyond that. And one of the things, you referenced some of the research done recently. When Abacus Data did their survey of the electorate, they found only 44% of Canadians are even open to voting for the Conservative Party. That's too small. You're not going to get all of them. You need that to be sort of in the 55 to 60% range in order to get your 45% of the vote. So I think it really involves around thinking bigger and adding people and trying to find ways to reach out to new groups, while obviously still keeping some of the, keeping your existing support.
If I may add, an important element here is also to not lose sight of the time it takes for rebrand. It's very nice to come on this show and talk about repositioning, rebranding, but the reality is that it takes time and it takes resources, and that won't happen overnight. I would strongly suggest that although this is not going to be clear until June as to who's the leader and therefore what are the policies and what is the platform and how is this going to evolve as a brand, the reality is there's not an awful lot of time. So when Dennis talks about this research, for example, presenting the party as old and closed and all that, that data exists right now. Some of the decisions could be made right now. I understand it's a different process, it's a political party, it's not a can of soup, but at the end of the day, it's the same need to have consumers, in this case voters, feel that the message resonates with them, that the brand connects with them, that they feel engaged with that brand. And so I think they've got a whole lot of work to do soon and fast.
I want to pick up on that, Dennis, because I'm wondering, based on that kind of a practical statement, it takes a long time, but what else does it take? Like, how might the new brand be communicated? Is it just through the leader, or are there other means to do it?
No, I think it's a bunch of different things. I mean, it's obviously it will be a new leader, but it's the policies, it's the communication style, and you can get down to sort of some of the practical elements. I mean, if you take a look at the actual sort of logo and visual identity of the party and the lawn signs, I mean, they really haven't fundamentally changed since the party was put together in 2003. So I think there's some sort of rudimentary work that could be done, but it really is a communication style, it's policies, it's a whole bunch of things, and I think I actually maybe put that as a challenge to Mr. Scheer in this period he has here. Obviously, he's an interim leader, he's in a caretaker role. But you look at what Ron Ambrose did when she was interim leader. You can make a big sort of imprint on that time. And if I was him, I would be spending my time looking forward. And so when a new leader comes in, you've sort of taken some of the decisions early on, or set it up so that they can make a move right away and not sort of lose this 5-6 months.
Is that going to be hard, Eric, for Andrew Scheer to do, given the public's perception of the brand that he transmitted during the campaign? What do you think, or is it necessary?
Well, it's certainly a bit of a challenge if he becomes the spokesperson, I would think. But I think he's just been handed a nice report with an awful lot of lessons learned, some good stuff, some not so good stuff that led to the outcome here in this last election. So there's learning there as well. I mean, there's this market research Dennis was talking about, but there's all kinds of good learning that I think could serve as a foundation for some good thinking in terms of this brand strategy, which is what's required here, is call it a rebranding if you want, but some brand strategy with a clear sense of where this party needs to go in order to win the next election. And hopefully the membership will pick a leader that embodies this brand, this new brand vision, I guess.
Dennis, if you were to articulate what you think the best brand for the party would be going forward, what would it be?
I think I take a look at some of the measures that were in the Abacus research, and that's are you aligned to working people? Are you transparent? Are you authentic? I mean, that's a huge thing in this era, and really finding ways to be open, and these things I'm mentioning to you, they're not sort of left or right things. I hope the party doesn't get lost in ideology and sort of drag itself somewhere. It's about finding ways to be sort of relevant and culturally relevant to the parts of the country that are growing and changing the fastest.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you both very much for this discussion. It was a great one. Really appreciate your time. Thanks to Eric Blais, President of Headspace Marketing, and Dennis Matthews, Vice President of Marketing and Communications with Enterprise. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.